All TUG events and speaker presentations are available in high-definition download from ethymarket.com. Is completely blown. Dr. Sam Osmanagic, I'm telling you, I want to go to Bosnia and I want to go dig up some pyramids with you because holy crap, am I excited. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Next up, we have our own Melfi, who's going to take us through some dragonology. Because when you want to talk about the beginnings and the origins and the mythology, oh, this is so where we need to start. Awesome. Mel, take it away.
Thank you, Dee. Okay, hi everybody, back again. I think I finally composed myself after Dr. Kreda Mutwa, only to have the wind taken out of my sails with Dr. Samir Osmanagic's stuff, and what a tough act to follow. So I'm going to do my best, and just to give a broad overview. It's been very interesting because having listened to everybody's information, it all ties together really what my own exploration of languages has revealed. So I'm going to go to share screen and just jump straight into the presentation. Okay. Right. How's it doing, Biggie?
Good.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, guys. So this is obviously the Origin Symposium, which has been hosted by the Untangled Gathering, which we'll be doing regularly. So give me 2 seconds here. So everybody knows the work that I do on Conscious Consumer Network as perhaps the content director, but also my passion and love for history. And I'm actually just thinking which book I should grab off the table. I'm pulling them out today thick and fast. We've had Dr. Kreda Mutwa with us. And yeah, I don't really know which book to reach for first, but I myself have had a long, passionate love affair with history and mythology. And, you know, I've got, I don't know how many books on my shelf, which really is an evidence of a lifetime of study from just different perspectives, from a perspective of just a keen childhood interest to a perspective of waking up and realizing that there's more to our reality than what we have been taught by mainstream media, education, and religion. Basically, I've chose the name dragonology because it's more encompassing of the area of study that we go into. And just to give you an understanding of the labels and the titles that we give to certain things, and to understand why we call it that, because ultimately we've been taught to categorize things certain ways. Under certain labels, we then get taught those labels get treated a certain way. For example, anything that's relegated under legend or fairy tale gets kind of relegated to being labeled as well as semi-dismissive or not real. It almost gets passed off as mythological. Mythological means it's, you know, we can't really define it as, has it really happened, or is it something we just made up? Okay. So mythology largely comprises of that collection of old human stories, which are widely regarded by the ignorant majority as fanciful tales of impossible heroes and gods from long gone eras, which have been imprisoned in the limited available lexicons of successive verbally oriented cultural histories. Even the use of the word myth or mythology limits the idea one can have of this cultural deity. The word myth originates from the Roman solar deity known as Mithra, And subsequently, all non-Christianized history has been relegated under this very limited symbolic lexicon. Solar deities and indeed sun symbolism are nothing more than symbolic representations masking the existence of dragon cults or dragon cultists, which is evident in many cultural histories. In fact, the far more accurate way of referencing to the past global cultural histories would be to reference it not as mythology, but as dragonology, as dragons can be traced in every major genre of cultural history, more so than the solar deity known as Mithra, which by contrast is prevalent in only one part of history, and thus one cultural mythology, being that of pantheistic Roman times before the implementation and institution of the Christian religion. Okay, so that's why we call this body of work dragonology. And I actually want to scrap the word mythology from our usage. So when I talk about mythology, I actually should be saying dragonology. Mythology limits us to one period in history. And it is the period in history that has kind of been the dominant culture since then and dictated what we've gotten to learn. Because if you think about it, out of the Roman culture came Latin. And from the Latin alphabet, the Roman alphabet, came all of our languages throughout Europe and the language that I'm currently speaking. So it's all pretty much been dictated from there. Language dictated from the point of view of the dominant culture. And then language determines how we form our basic ideas. So again, it's got to be called dragonology, not mythology. Language is like a puzzle. Only those of an initiated level will know how that puzzle is put together. Okay? And like I say, it all starts somewhere. And a course in dragonology will give you the necessary deciphering tools which will enable you to decipher initiate level knowledge about the true nature of our reality, our true history, and our true origins. Now, we're going to go on to track human origins, but in order to do that, we need to, I suppose, establish a method of a best practice before we do that. Okay, it's important to ask, how do we go about doing it? Because there's so many ways it's been done in the past, predominantly from the perspective of the dominant culture. So how is it that we go about tracking human origins here and now from a simple point of view, without falling into the traps of using a perspective that's subject to hereditary prejudice? How do we track human origins? Well, we go through an examination of various aspects of our culture, including language, mythology, history, religion, art, sculpture, and architecture. Overlay all these various areas on top of each other, and it gives you a pretty accurate interpretation of our past. We'll start with language, because I suppose that's the one that all of us can identify with. We read characters and letters in a book every day, and it's possibly one of the easiest ways and most obvious places to start when you start tracking cultural histories, peoples, looking at things from an anthropological point of view, but being true to that pursuit of truth, because as I said already, anthropology has always normally been portrayed, particularly by the universities, from the point of view of the dominant culture. So in order to pull away all the clandestine fluff of the past, of divide, conquer, and conquest, and look at what is the true history, language is, for me, the most obvious place to start. Language is intrinsically linked to the cultural identification we have through written script and oral tradition. It is through language that thoughts, concepts, ideologies, and experiences of the past cultures are preserved. And thus, language deserves a thorough analysis to see the clues to our origins that it reveals. So we start with Christianic dragonology, or mythology, if you will. And I really enjoy going in from this perspective of looking at language and seeing where it comes up in the Bible that we need to know that what comes first is the word, all right? It says here, John 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. Okay, we're going to talk about word and God very intrinsically, but also word and origin, all right? Since this is the origin seminar, we need to understand our origins, and we're going to do that through looking at various words, including word, as well as the concept of God. Origins through a study of etymological and philological, or etymology and philology, we can clearer understand human cultural origins, okay? Etymology is the study of words, their meanings, how their form has changed over time, okay? So if you actually look at a way a word is formed and you start to pull it apart, perhaps cut it up into syllables or looked at what it means in other languages, you start to perhaps get a better understanding, particularly from the more ancient languages. And a good example, ironically enough, is the fact that the word that makes up etymology, which is the Greek word etymos, actually means true. And what is very interesting to note is I love using this particular picture when I demonstrate this point, because this is a bronze casting by Olin Warner, and it actually sits on the Library of Congress building in Washington, D.C. And this is truth holding a snake and a mirror. Symbolic expression in language. Clever and crafty use of symbolism in language has hidden the true nature of the gods, demigods, deities, angels, devils, monarchy, pharaohs, emperors, fairies, vampires, and dragons. Yes, the whole lot. Their true nature and existence is encoded into our language symbolically through the mode and application of homonyms and synonyms. Now, homonyms are words, just so that I can, for those who don't understand the definitions, homonyms are words that sound the same. Synonyms are words that reference a similar thing or that are normally associated with each other. For example, apples and pears are normally synonymous with each other. Day and night, synonymous with each other. So dragon etymology, all right? We showed that picture of truth holding the serpent. Serpents and dragons, of course, are symbols of each other. Dragon etymology. An analysis of dragon etymology details the non-human race of creatures that are the dragons, or that are dragon-like in appearance. They rule the human mind through thought manipulation implanted into the very fabric of language. The intention of the dragon is to hold humanity in a construct of a serpentine, dragon, or reptilian-natured conceptual framework for the purposes of vampiring, energy, energetic manipulation, etc. Now, we spoke earlier on today in the seminar with Dr. Kreda Mutwa, and it's interesting to note that the same story exists in every single culture throughout the world. And, it really blew me away to hear him say it, that we, human beings, Homo sapien, once lived upon the planet as agriculturalists. And then suddenly the dragons turned up. And they gave us our institutions, our rules of law, our religions. They taught us to hunt and eat meat and write. Theatre is rooted in that, and I will get on to explain that. But specifically language, we didn't necessarily write or speak prior to these beings turning up. One of the oldest and most common stories of human origins, found in various forms in different cultures around the world, is revolved around the creational myth. All right? Now, the Christianic creational myth starts at Genesis. And the Genesis story, obviously, is various themes which play out. And I'm going to focus on a few of them because they're also prevalently important. We get told about specific lexicons, and they aren't for no reason. All of them have a reason, and it's only when you get into the etymology you understand why and what that reason really is. So let's start with the Edenic concept of paradise. And I like to obviously use classical art, myself being an artist. So look at Cranach painting here. The concept of Eve, apple, and the serpent. Okay. One of the most common themes, or three of the most common themes that turn up in the sort of creational myth of the Christianic myth, which falls under the chapter of Genesis, the first book in the Bible. All right. Eve, apple, and serpent. One of the most telling elements of the Garden of Eden story is the serpent convincing Eve to eat forbidden fruit. It doesn't necessarily state in the Bible at first that it's an apple. It's actually initially translated as forbidden fruit. It has, through artwork and whatever else, been portrayed as an apple, but actually it could very well have been pears or very many other fruits. And I'll go on to explain why that's significant. Another concept that turns up, or another icon that turns up in the Garden of Eden is Adam's first wife, Lilith, all right? And in the alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith was Adam's first wife, made from the same earth and at the same time as Adam, whereas Eve was apparently made from Adam's rib, okay? Lilith apparently left Adam after she refused to become subservient to him and coupled with the archangel Samael. That becomes important as well. This is a John Collier painting of Lilith, absolutely gorgeous, wrapped in a serpent. And you'll find this is a very common depiction when we deal with the realm of mythology, is people being wrapped in serpents. Okay, so let's look at some of the etymology. Start with, obviously, because it's the origin seminar, we're going to pull apart the word origins. We've spoken about the word, we've spoken about Genesis, and of course, paradise, Eve, the apple and forbidden fruit, the serpent, Lilith, and the angel. And these are the concepts we're going to focus on today because these all come up in the origins story. So just a bit of recap for those who have been following our dragonologies. This will be familiar territory to you. For those who are new, pay close attention. We're going to go fast. Okay, so serpentine etymology, dragon etymology. The most common dragon root when you're dealing with dragon etymology is the O-R root. It's a combination of O and R, which sometimes can be combined as O-U-R, okay? And the O-R sometimes takes on the PH, the phi sound from Greek, and that can sometimes drop the R and put an I at the end. And the I, of course, transliterates into any vowel sound, the E, the Y, the A, and sometimes the U. The most common serpentine or dragon root is, of course, the or, orf, or ophi root, okay? And a demonstration of that, to demonstrate how this word illustrates a serpent root, this is illustrated in the constellation known as Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus, of course, references the serpent bearer. This is Ophiuchus holding the constellation of serpents, which is actually divided into two. It's serpent's cauda, the tail part, and serpent's caput, which is the head part, but it's actually technically one constellation, the constellation of serpents. Okay, another example here of the ORPH is the god of music from ancient Greece, Orpheus. And Orpheus, of course, containing the dragon root word orf. So notice Orpheus with his Phrygian cap, which pops up everywhere. Morpheus, not only a very interesting character in the Matrix, the red or the blue pill. No, this Morpheus is the god of dreams from ancient Greek mythology. The word Morpheus contains the dragon root word orf, very commonly popping up. Other words that contain the or root, apart from origin, obviously, orientation, oriental. Now think about what these words are saying. So at the beginning, your orientation is what? It's all about the origins, okay? Oriental referencing the East. Word, and of course, sword is very similar to word. World is very similar to word. order, story, glory, as in victory and glory. In fact, victory is also an or serpentine root. Orphan, organ, orgasm, oracle, orc, orchard, Mormon, Gorgon, as in Medusa, Greek deity with snakes for hair was a Gorgon, and mortal. So all of those words contain the dragon root word or. So you can see how many interesting words come out of this particular root. Now we're going to deal with the word Genesis, because Genesis is a very telling first book in the Bible, but also has the gene in it, all right? The word Genesis has the dragon root word gen or gene. Very important. This is one of the most important roots for me after the or root. And why, when you're dealing with the origins, okay, you have the or, which is the most important root in dragon etymology, and the second most important root being the gene or the jin root, turning up in origin. So this is why it's so important etymologically, the word origin, and why this conference is called Origin. Let's deal with this gene root. Okay, so the Genesis, the root is rooted in the dragon etymological root of gen or gene, which of course, gen or gene becomes genetic or genealogy, generate, generation, genius or genie, or gin, like the drink, a spirit, an alcoholic spirit. And of course, you've got the word jinn turning up in origin. Oh, there we go. Jinn, of course, stems from the dragon etymological Arabic verbal root, jinn with a D-J-E-N. Okay, that DJ is very, very important, the jinn. Now, what's interesting to note is that DJ actually turns into the G when it's transliterated in later tongues. And this G symbol turns up on the Freemason symbol, okay? But what it's referencing is the J, all right? This, and we go on to speak a little bit about the DJ as well. So jinn, and obviously it transliterates into this spelling of jinn, dropping the D to just the J-I-N-N. And of course, this jinn references the genie, commonly depicted like this, particularly from the Disney classic. And this is classical Arabic depictions of what the jinn look like. You can see winged creatures, serpents, horns. Here we go, horns, wings. Now talking about the DJ, the phonetic sound of J is represented as the resting cobra in Egyptian hieroglyphics and is normally associated with royalty, rulers, or gods. For example, a high priest was called Pine Gem with a DJ sound in it. Normally, the DJ sound is only ever put into the names of very high-ranking priesthood, rulers, royalty, gods. And just to talk a little bit about, we're going on to the Egyptian theme, these sort of half serpent, half human, godlike figures turn up everywhere in Egyptian dragonology. And here we go again. Here's another interpretation of this, a winged serpent, a plumed winged serpent being given an offering. Okay, let's talk about paradise. Of course, we're dealing with the Edenic theme of paradise. The word paradise stems from the dragon etymological root group para, pala, pio. Now, these three dragon root words are normally root linked together. I always discuss them as a root triad because they are inextricably linked. They actually, through various evolutions, are key root words in various dragon rooted words. For example, the word para indicates, of course, what we've been saying is that dragons are in fact the rulers of royalty. What Kratom, which was said earlier, is that people came from the sky, seated the kings. They were well, he wasn't wanting to get into the detail, but we know it was the dragons seated the kings, the gods, or whatever, the pharaohs. Para, Pharaoh. That's how the word Pharaoh came about, is because it takes on the dragon root to indicate serpent royalty. The Amakosi is what Serpent Creator Mutwa called it earlier. The gods and kings had the same word, Amakosi. Here we go. We've got the dragon root in with the word Pharaoh, much like we talk about basilisk and basileus. Basilisk being a winged serpent capable of killing with a glance. Basileus, the Greek word for king or ruler. So here we go again, getting into how we move into the language part of things and talk about how important language is, because the para, which is a serpent root, starts to turn up in things which reference writing, reading, anything to do with literature, such as parables or paragraphs. Paraphrase even would be a good one to use here. Language that originates with dragons, okay, language etymology that originates with the dragons, for example, as I've already said, parable. A synonym for parable is fable, okay? And the word fey gets dealt with in a little bit as well. So like para is a root for dragon, so is the word fey, a root for dragon. Fable. And then, of course, we've spoken about story, all right? We're talking about literature here. Language, writing, reading, story, O-R. And then, of course, fairy tale and fantasy, which couples with fable, and we'll get into that in a second. Because we have to first understand who the god Phanes is. Phanes was a proto-genus god, basically, which is one of the first original creator gods, primeval god, and or known at least so in Orphic mythology or cosmology. And here again, Orphic, we've got this Orph root, meaning serpent cosmology, dragon cosmology. Phanes evolved into the word fey and fairy, okay? That's where you get fey. And you get the word fame as well, as in famous, comes from Phanes. So you got fey, fairy, fable, fantasy, fairy tale, pane as in window pane, because of course the arts of glass making came from the dragons, and pain as in physical pain. And that's pretty significant if you understand that the word fury also is evolved from the word fairy, and angry evolves from the word angel. Makes sense that the word pain fits in here too. So apples and Eve, inextricably linked. In fact, apple and Eve are pretty much the same word. They've just evolved over time into different incarnations, but effectively come from the same root. As we've said, vowel sounds can transliterate. So for Eve, you take the A out and you get Ava. We've seen the Ave Maria, or Ave Caesar. And then that, I beg your pardon, that should be an A. A-V-A could be Ava. And that can actually transliterate into Afa, because in Dutch, or the Germanic languages, the V sound, what we sound as a V for victory, actually in the Germanic or Dutch languages is an F sound. So, for example, I'll use one here, Volkswagen, right? The V is pronounced as an F in English, and the W is pronounced as a V in English. And you can see this very clearly here, is that the V is pronounced as an F, which is a very common transliteration. If you speak English, Dutch, or Afrikaans, you will be fully aware of that. And of course, the double P is what replaced the phi sound at one stage. Particularly, you'll notice that, for example, in French, you'll find double P's being used instead of the PH. But in this case, it's actually retained the P sound as opposed to going to the F sound. So apple. Okay, so we've got Eve, Ava, Ava, Afa, and apple. And Afa is actually an Arabic word meaning viper. In fact, Afa and viper possibly came from each other. We spoke about forbidden fruit earlier, and this really freaked me out, because when I started finding this out, this little nugget of just how many fruit are tied into serpentine etymology. It wasn't a coincidence at all that almost every fruit that I eat was. Symbolically, the forbidden fruit represents withheld or sacred knowledge. And withheld and sacred knowledge is inextricably linked with the dragon. So how many fruit are there for, or plant, or flora and fauna kind of etymology there is? So let's have a quick look. It's all linked into sort of this specific theme of fruit or plant, fauna and flora. So the word apple, of course, as we discussed. Pear comes from the pala-para-pio root. We've spoken about grape in previous etymologies. You just have to akin it to the words rape and grove. Orange with the OR root in there. Ange being the angel root. Okay, A-N-G. Banana, okay, anas actually is rape, a word for rape, which of course ties into grape. Peach has the first three letters of pear, which of course is the pala-para-pio root. Lychee, which ties into the look, lick, leech root. Tree, of course, ties into the thi root. Plant is the pala-para-pio root. Green is the gin root. Here we've got the or. Lily, which we will discuss in a bit. That's the Lilith root. Orchard, of course, you've got the OR there. Grove, as we've already spoken about, Bohemian Grove, hence anyone. Forest, OR there, and floral, OR there. So, not a coincidence, not by accident. All of this is rooted in dragon etymology. And because we're limited with time, I won't go into all of it. For those of you who are keen to learn a bit more, please go watch my dragonology episodes 1 through 13, available in high definition at ethymarket.com. And it takes you through exactly how each of these words are actually originate with the dragon. All right, we did mention Lilith, so jumping on there. The word Lilith is interesting because you get the word lily, which of course is a flower, and the word lit. And this is the lily and the fleur de lis, which happens to be a symbol of the Merovingian bloodline, which is also a royal dragon bloodline, signified by the Holy Grail or the Serpent Grail or the Dragon Grail, which is a symbol of this protected royal sacred dragon bloodline of the angels or the gods. Lit, here we go. This obviously coming from Lilith. We've got the word lit here. Lit turns up in literature. We've already spoken about language, literature, reading, writing. Light. Torch, which has got the O-R-C, orc root. And of course, the torch is turned up in the hands of the Statue of Liberty, in the hands of Mithra and Phanes. And of course, lit, when we talk about light, we talk about illumination, electricity, halo, sun, and day. All these are words synonymous with light. And of course, we can't talk about light without talking about the light bearer or light bringer, Lucifer. The word Lucifer evolved from the Latin term lux fer, meaning light bringer or light bearer. And of course, we need to go into the angels. Angels are dragons. Angels are demons. Demons are angels. The word angel evolved from the Latin words anguium and angui, meaning serpent. The language of the angels, okay? English is the language of the angels, proven by the fact that the English comes from England, which is actually called Angleland. This is where it initially got the name England from, Angleland. Hence, the term such as Anglo-Saxon. It actually takes the first bit of angel from Anglo, all right? In English, all right, as we said, English is the language of the angels. In English, or in Dutch and Afrikaans, I should say, the English language is referenced as Engels. So, as ek Afrikaans of ek wil Nederlands spreken, en ek wil na die mense van Engeland se taal praat, dan spreek ek Engels. Sorry, if anyone didn't understand that, it was a very bad half Dutch, half Afrikaans attempt to say that if I come from England, I speak English, all right? So the Dutch would reference the English language as Engels, okay? But the Dutch and Afrikaans also reference angels as Engels. So the Dutch and Afrikaans word for English and angels is exactly the same word. And that is because English is the language of the angels. Now, just to pop back here, angels and engels, you know, the EL always pops up in the angels and the engels, L, and that's no coincidence. You always find the EL popping up, and it's evident in very many things. The Elohim, of course, which is mighty angel, creator, God, or whatever. Angels, hello, and then halo, hell, electricity, and eel, which is an electric water snake. Interesting. And of course, the biblical names of angels all have EL at the end, not by coincidence, all right? Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Samael, Azazel, Selathiel, Barachiel, and Jeremiel. I think there are many more of them, but those are the ones I was able to find, all with the EL at the end, because they're referencing this quality of light, like halos, and, you know, always a shining quality of light. Now, you'll notice often, always look at what these angels wear. If they're wearing this sort of red billowing thing around them like this, robe, that means they're red, means dragon bloodline. The green normally means it's the archangel Gabriel. Gabriel normally comes in green. Okay, so let's talk about writing. We're talking about literature, reading, writing, paragraphs, parables, fables, stories. Of course, this language all ties into each other. And the word writ, write, ritual, and the word writ fits into all of them. It is the root of all of these, and it's a very important root, okay? Because it turns up in the word ifrit. The ifrit are described as enormous winged creatures likened to demons, the equivalent of Satan. This is obviously in the Arabic traditions. And ivrit, all right, which is very similar to ifrit. Remember, we said the F and the V transliterate from each other, from the English to the Dutch, Proto-Dutch Germanic languages. Ivrit, all right, Judaic law equates the ifrit with writing and ritual. The word ivrit denotes the Hebrew language. Sincerely, keep calm and learn ivrit. When you tell someone to learn ivrit, you're telling them to learn Hebrew, all right? That is what the word ivrit references, the Hebrew language. So even the word for a dragon references a language, a specific language, not just any language, the Hebrew language of all languages, the dragon language. Just like English is the language of the angels, Ifrit is the language of the Ifrit. What are the Ifrit? Enormous winged creatures. That can't be coincidence that both English is a language of winged creatures being the angels, and Ivrit, language of the Jews, is the language of the Ifrit, which are also winged creatures. Writ. The word writ is etymologically cognizant with root and root, as in tree roots, or I dye my black roots blonde, or root as in the route I took to get to work or to get to the shops, or whatever the case may be. So in reference and context, and quite ironically, let's play this out. The direct route to our roots is an examination, is to examine the aspects pertaining to writing and ritual. Okay? No jokes. The writ root. I'm going to get tongue-tied. The writ root is here. All right. Culture. Culture. Whew. Most activity engaged in for fun, entertainment, competition, or celebration is usually an evolution of some form of ritual practice. And this includes, of course, theatre and media, which modern-day entertainment, such as Hollywood and stuff, evolved largely out of theatre. I think that's, pretty much a no-brainer. Of course, sport as well evolved out of theatre, and theatre evolved out of ritual. Most holiday celebrations are a ritual celebration of some sort. So are festivals, music, and guess what? No jokes, religion. So let's look at religion for a second. The word religion is a word borrowed from the Latin transitive verb religare, meaning to bind or moor a boat. All right, so we're talking about contracting. And also, when you talk about the gods of ancient Egypt, you often find this kind of a heavenly boat kind of thing turning up. And these boats are actually a symbol of rulers and royalty. For example, I use the word kingship, all right, or lordship. And this is why it's that etymology is important. All of the major religions stem from the same origin, okay? The most popularly used word when we talk in this realm of information, origin. This can be seen by the implementation of recognizable archetypes which turn up in every religion. So how do we define the fact that all religions come from a single common origin? That common origin we will define in a bit, but there is a single common origin. All right, and that is we need to look at the archetypes of all religions, look at their similarities, and it's not hard to find. You only need to look at the names to see which names are similar of all the archetypal deities. Okay, let's have a look. Vedic, the oldest of all the religions, the Vedic archetypal deity is called Deus Pitta, which evolved into the Greek Deus, which is also Zeus, which became Jupiter when the Romans invaded Greece and took over their religion. Jupiter, which when the Roman pantheism turned into Roman monotheism and became Christianity, Jupiter turned into Saint Peter. Yeah, can you see how that's evolved? And just to take you through this here, this is an interpretation of Deus Pitta. This is Deus or Zeus. Jupiter, Saint Peter, holding the keys. Now, what's interesting is that he's holding keys here, all right? But, I beg your pardon, in this one, he's holding a lightning bolt. Now, this quality of light and flashing and energy, really, like whether it's a glowing halo or shining or light or day, there is this quality of a wielding, a manipulation of energy. And that's the story of Prometheus. And Prometheus is effectively the countertype, or was reincarnated under Judaic and Christianic mythology as Lucifer, the one that was tossed out of heaven. And what Prometheus actually did was, Prometheus was the god that gave electricity and power and energy to the world. And how we as human beings started using it was because of Prometheus, and the gods were very angry. They chucked him out of heaven and all sorts. And I'll get into that another day, but it is very, very interesting. It's all about maintaining manipulation of energetics. Okay. All right, we're talking about archetypal deities, the solar deities, all right? So an Egyptian solar deity, the most common one, of course, being Horus, all right, with the O-R root, Horus. And you can see Horus has a sun above him, usually always depicted with a sun above him, funny enough, wrapped in a uraeus, which is a rearing cobra. And then you've got the various depictions of Jesus, normally with a halo or a sun cross behind him, because Jesus, of course, is a solar deity. Just have to know the basics of astrotheology to understand these facts. Another solar deity, of course, being the Roman god Mithra. Mithra over here is known as Sol Invictus, or that's Latin for the unconquered sun. And of course, Mithra depicted with sun rays behind his head and was what became Jesus. Phanes came from ancient Greece and was what came before Mithra, and often depicted wrapped in a snake. We've seen that before with Lilith, with wings like angels or demons, and in a cosmic egg, which usually is depicted as the zodiac. Yeah. All religions and cult symbolism and iconography mask the existence and worship of the dragon. And you only need to look at this depiction of the Cotronalia Nadler by David de Necker to actually see how they've included this kind of iconography in very cleverly. All right, very, very, very cleverly. And one of the most interesting things to notice here is the astrotheological it is an astrotheological literal hybrid going on symbolically, because what we've got is, just as Jesus is depicted as the sun and the 12 disciples are depicted as the 12 months or the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Jesus as the sun god makes his way around the sky, and which is why Mithra is depicted as in a zodiac, because he's in fact a sun god too. Here we've got how many wings? 1, 2, 3, okay, of the little flares on the wings are pointing down, okay, so grouping that 3 together. And you've got another here, 1, 2, 3, pointing up. So it groups that 3 together. Same story here. 3 little flecks pointing up, 3 little flecks on the end of the wings pointing down. The direction of these flecks distinctly group the wings together, giving you the same when you have the horizontal cross and the vertical cross through the solar cross, which sits behind Jesus's head, okay? Because the solar and horizontal cross represent the cross of the zodiac and cuts the circle into 4 bits. So you've got 4 groups of 3, and each of those circles of the zodiac are divided into 4 seasons or 4 particular individual characters of the zodiac. I beg your pardon, 3 individual characters in each section of 4. And then, of course, Jesus would be the sun god at the center. Always look out for this 12, 3, and 4 configuration in depictions like this, because what they're doing is they're hiding very clever, multi-layered, astrotheological hybrid symbolism into this, and they're telling you here what it is. And the fact that they've included it with an eagle with his head on the sun, okay, facing 2 ways with a crown on. Well, this is more like a dragon, isn't it? Very clearly not. This, I've never seen an eagle look like this with red eyes. So this must be a dragon. It's very clearly laid out. Okay, we're talking about things that are influenced by the dragon. Of course, sport is no different. Most sport, especially ball sport, oh yeah, ball sport is largely a ritual for worshipping, for the purposes of worshipping the god Baal. No joking. Even the word Baal is in Dutch or German. You don't say ball, you say Baal. Ik skop die bal. I kick the ball. Ball sport is Baal worship, basically. Provable fact. Just have to look at the numerology of it. All sports, races, and competition are basically same thing. It's all based on ritual. All sport originate on the desire or requirement to celebrate ritual in new ways by evolving customs whilst keeping key symbolic indicators which reference the key intention of the activity, which is usually based in occult practice of ritual and worship of gods and dragons. Now, the key indicators are normally things like the numbers, so sporting scores. Always look at the numbers, all right? But, think of the earliest sports that we know of, the Olympics. They were a religious festival dedicated to the god Zeus, celebrated with ritual sacrifices, okay? So, very, very important to understand that sport, of course, is all about ritual worship of Baal, or Zeus, or the gods, or whatever you want to call them. And of course, you spoke about media. Media evolved from theatre, and the earliest forms of theatre, as we know them, of course, is Greek theatre. And even the etymology within the realms of theatre is very, very interesting, because, of course, here we've got what we call the orchestra, which is the central pit, which would contain the chorus. And, of course, orchestra and chorus have the O-R root in it. Then you've got the paradoi, or parados, which are these things here where the columns are, which is where people parade past, where the actors or the chorus parade past. That's why it's called paradoi. Para, obviously, para, serpent root. And then in the center you would have what's called the altar. You know, what do you do on an altar? Sacrifice, as far as I remember. Anyway, what these ancient Greek theatres were nothing but an elaborate set for rituals, for ritual engagements, okay, which often contained elaborate scenes. And they actually had religious festivals like the City Dionysia in ancient Greece, which was a festival dedicated to Dionysus, or Bacchus as he became known in Rome, and complete with all kinds of ritual rites and religious revelry. And of course, the word theatre takes its root from Thespis, which was supposedly the first actor, but again, that's debatable. And this is a thespian mask, thespian being what we call today an actor or an actress. So theatre and Thespis, obviously coming from the the root, which I'll get into in just a second. Theatre etymology, okay? The the, let's have a look at this, the. The references anything to do with the gods, dragons, or archons. That's why you find, for example, when you're referencing any subject, you normally put the book, or you're referencing a noun, the table, or you go for an indefinite reference of a table, but even the letter A is the first letter of the alphabet, referencing the alpha, and the letter A is actually a depiction of the eye, all-seeing eye, and the capstone, which is raised from the pyramid. So that is also referencing the same thing symbolically as the, which references the gods, dragons, or archons. So at the beginning of each sentence, you'd either have a man picks up a book or the man picks up a book. Either way, you're putting the in the alpha position because it references the gods, dragons, or archons. And you can see how by the very way we construct our sentences, we give homage first to the gods before everything else. And an interesting illustration of this is thesaurus. We've gone over language, it's the root of culture. But if you talk about a place where you can go and look up words, you can look at a thesaurus, all right? The, that means God. Saurus actually means lizard or dragon, okay, in Latin. But sau in Arabic means light, the quality of light, like Lucifer. And then, of course, the turns up in theology, theosophy, Madame Blavatsky's sort of religion, and thelema, which of course is Aleister Crowley's cult. Monotheism, referencing the belief in one god, or polytheism, the belief in many gods. Pantheon, the home of the gods. And of course, Theotokos talks about the offspring of the gods or the dragons, who were then in fact the hemithoi, half gods, or demigods, because they were half dragon, half human. These guys apparently were capable of the qualities of therianthropy, okay, which is the ability to shapeshift or metamorphose, okay, and also what is known as theophania, with the the and feign root in it, okay, the ability to appear and disappear as and when they wanted to appear suddenly out of nowhere and then be gone, like ghosts, spirits, or phantoms, which is rooted in feigns. And then, of course, the is the root of Athens and Athena, right? One of the most prevalent goddesses of ancient Greek mythology. So you can see how intrinsically, if the gods, the creator gods, all the gods of our world now are dragons, and everything seems to point to that because all religion roots back to the common origins, which is the worship of the dragon. They created our language for us to speak and made it very dragon-like in nature. Almost every word, every concept that we conceptualize is formed through serpentine etymological root words, through the root of our creator, and through the very origins of our humanity. In conclusion, our entire modern-day culture is an artificial construct based upon a conceptual framework that is distinctly serpentine or dragon-like in characteristic. This has been engineered through the inheritance of language, which ultimately masks universal symbols written in code. Symbolism exists in every culture that has created a written text or language. Ultimately, all symbolism exists as a mechanism of subterfuge, usually to mask the nature of the dragon and to mask the nature of our reality, which by and large revolves around the unknowing worship of the dragon. And that is it for us, folks. Please do stay tuned. We have lots of great speakers still to come on the Untangled gathering tonight. We have Johan Oldenkamp coming on after this, as well as some speakers talking about the great temples in Malta. So that's Francis Xavier Aloisio and several others still. So please don't go anywhere, guys. The Untangled gathering continues. And please do feel free to support CCN. Do go to the Network Support Fund and donate to us. Also, we will be collecting funds for Dr. Credo Mutwa, so feel free to go to the Network Support Fund and donate to Dr. Credo Mutwa as well. And for those of you who have tuned in for this presentation, thank you very much. Stay tuned. Lots of great stuff still to come.